29-year-old Zach Baako, who was a Croydon gangster, and his criminal pals, 27-year-old John Budal, took a huge gamble. They were opportunists. They were greedy, gluttonous, and had no issue with taking what they wanted by force, even if that meant by putting a blade to a person's stomach or neck. Part of the drug-dealing gang, Zach, John, and other GM Omari Peat were men of many trades. On any given day, they were rappers, trapstars, drug dealers, and also bums. They had no ethos or good traits, and it showed because they set out to rob a drug dealer who was doing better than them in all aspects of life. However, this is the sad reality of the drug culture and the people that wallow in it, and 27-year-old Michael Alfonso Peixoto was the victim of his own occupation. Reports say Michael was a known dealer who made a lot of money selling Class A, white to be specific, and he was selling large quantities that had a high purity. Zach Baako, John Budal, and Omari Peat had heard how well Michael was doing, called it jealousy. Together, the men hatched a plan, a simple one, and that was to set the dealer up and take all of his Class A. Under the direction of the Croydon-based gang, a call was placed to Michael's line used for dealing and sales and buys. On the phone, a person linked to Zach says, "I want to buy Class A." Michael gave the price, and the amount was agreed without hesitation or barter, and the meeting point was given as Mayfield Crescent. With that, the call ended, and the person whom placed the call has not been named. However, no sale would take place. Zach, John, and Omari had hatched a plan to lure Michael to Mayfield Crescent, and they would lay in wait. When they would see Michael, the gang was going to rob him for everything he had: the Class A, the money, watch, jewellery, cars, and phone. On December 19th of 2023, Zach Baako had met up with 4 others, including Omari Peat and John Budal, armed with a large blade, Rambo in style. Together, Zach, John, and Omari and one other had piled into a white BMW and travelled to Mayfield Crescent 30 minutes before the agreed meeting point. Now idle, waiting, and restless, Zach and others had taken out cigs and used it to pass the time. However, they had discarded the butts on the floor, leaving DNA evidence at the scene of their crime. Amateurs. Now Michael and the female friend had arrived at the scene in a Vauxhall Grandland. Michael was completely and utterly oblivious to the fact that he had been set up, and he was now walking directly into a trap after he exited the car. As soon as the door to the Vauxhall Grandland had shut, Zach was out of the white BMW, and he had stormed over to Michael face to face, blade pressed to the victim. Without even a chance to barter or haggle or come to some form of agreement or even hand over the Class A, Zach was said to have gone straight into K mode. He then bladed Michael in the arm, wrist, back, chest, a total of 5 times, which meant that Zach Baako must have swung wide and with ferocity, and he had to have shifted round Michael to cause multiple wounds to him. At one point, it was said that Michael had tried to defend himself and make his way back to the car, but it proved futile because he was surrounded and John Budal had intervened, landing blows on an already injured man. In the last moments of Michael Alfonso Peixoto's life, the 27-year-old was not looked at as a son or a friend or a brother. He was looked at nothing more than a commodity, a rival, a drug dealer who needed to hand over all his cash and the stash of Class A and quietly die. His life, according to Zach, John, and Omari, did not matter. It was trivial by definition, just a number, and a means to make money. As Michael lay dying a few feet away from the car, the female friend who says had been screaming. However, Zach and Cole had wrapped their handle of the blade against the car window and forced the friend out of the Vauxhall. They also took her phone. Police says Zach had taken command of the Vauxhall Grandland with another person in the passenger seat, while the 2 others left the scene in a white BMW. In total, police says that the M, which was described as odious, barbaric and without remorse, and unrelenting, involved 5 people in total. Even if not all people there had taken place in the M, some had stood by and witnessed the incident, amplified and fueled Zach to go past the point of no return and take her life in order to get a stash of white, which would have then had to be shared with at least 5 people. The Croydon gang were not criminal masterminds, and the lack of consequential thinking showed because they could not look past the act of getting their hands on Class A, despite the robbery being pre-planned. Again, Zach Baako, John Budal and Omari Peat made some crazy blunders during their serious crime. Number 1, the men had used cigs and disposed of the butts at the side of the road at the crime scene, left them there. Secondly, the Croydon gang had let the female friend walk away after she was forced out of the car, and then Zach, John and Omari were captured on CCTV, arriving at the scene of the crime in a white BMW, where they idled about waiting for Michael. In the aftermath of the blading, police received multiple calls to say that a man was in the street with a pool of red going cold just after 10:30 p.m. Police and ambulance were dispatched to the scene. When emergency services arrived, they observed Michael laying in the street, obvious blade wounds to the back, arm and wrist and chest. He was given emergency care, but his injuries were too great and severe, and tragically, Michael was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, Michael's mum and dad had to contend with the fact that they had now lost a son, and it had to have been heartbreaking. The world must have stopped for those few moments when they heard that simple sentence. Now that this was an M investigation, a cordon was placed and forensics began to scan the scene for clues, while police officers conducted door-to-door inquiries and began to gather dashcam, ring doorbell and CCTV footage along Mayfield Crescent and the nearby roads. Forensics found the discarded cigs and they were sent to the lab to be tested. Police were not surprised when DNA matched John Budal, Zach and others. Right there and then, police knew that they had people of interests. Following forensic analysis, again they matched Zach Baako, John Budal, and also Omari Peat, who was 23 years old, from Mitcham. Police then used CCTV to trace and ultimately track down the location of the Vauxhall Grandland. Now, it was found abandoned a few streets down. Now, all 3 men, Zach, John and Omari, were tracked down and then placed in handcuffs, read their rights, and then taken back to the police station where they were charged with DM and robbery and then placed in custody. Now, during the multiple interviews, Zach, John and Omari were confronted with the news that police had CCTV and it put the men at the scene of the crime, and also police had forensically tied the men to the M's through the discarded cig butts. All of the Croydon gangsters refused to respond to the allegations. Instead, they kept their mouths shut, completely silent. When pathologists looked over the cause of the death, they said that Michael had been bladed a total of 5 times, with the fatal blow being to the chest, which made ribbons of his heart. That's how great a force Zach had used. Now, reports also say that the car Michael had travelled in also belonged to the female friend, and before she was allowed to walk free, her mobile phone had been confiscated by the Croydon gang. And during a 4-week trial, 29-year-old Zach Baako from Croydon was found guilty of the M and robbery. 20-year-old John Budal, who is from Streatham, was found not guilty of the M but instead guilty of manslaughter. And 23-year-old Omari Peat, who is from Mitcham, was found not guilty of the M and not guilty of manslaughter. However, he was found guilty of the robbery. Now, all 3 men are due to be sentenced in January of 2025, where we know for a fact at least Zach is definitely looking at a life sentence. And to make matters worse, police reported that they're not even sure if the Croydon gang even left the scene with the stash of Class A after committing such an atrocious crime like killing a man, which, if they did not get the draw, Michael Alfonso Peixoto was killed for nothing. Condolences. Stay safe.